You've built a life. You have a job, a home, opinions that are yours, a voice you've spent years learning to trust. And then you walk through a familiar door, the same door you walked through as a child, and something shifts quietly, completely, like your body remembers something your mind has been trying to forget. You become smaller, not in size, but in weight, in presence, in permission to exist as who you actually are. This is not weakness. This is something much older than that. You didn't know it was happening. You were just a child, learning the rules of your particular world. Which emotions were allowed in that house? Which needs were too loud? Which version of you made the room feel safe? And which version of you made things difficult? Some children grow up in homes where they are asked, quietly or openly, to become less expressive, less needy, less themselves. Not always through cruelty, sometimes through silence, sometimes through the kind of love that comes with conditions so subtle you only recognize them decades later, sitting in a car in a driveway, breathing slowly, preparing yourself. You learned what was acceptable. You shaped yourself around those edges, and you were good at it because you had to be. Psychologists call this adaptive behavior. You call it survival. You called it normal because normal is simply the water you grew up swimming in. The child who learns to make themselves small to keep the peace doesn't do so out of failure. They do so out of intelligence. They read the room. They adjusted. They protected themselves the only way they knew how. But adaptation has a cost, and that cost is this. The shape you learn to hold yourself in, it follows you, even into rooms you now have every right to stand tall in. When did you first learn that taking up space came with consequences? The strange thing about wounds formed in childhood is that they don't announce themselves. They integrate. They become the background music of your life, constant, familiar, just beneath the surface of everything. You grew older. You left, or you tried to. You built something that felt like distance. You had new friendships where no one knew the smaller version of you. You made decisions without asking for permission. You laughed loudly sometimes. You disagreed with people. You found, slowly, that you had a self. And for stretches of time, sometimes long ones, you genuinely forgot. But then the holidays would come, or someone would call with news, or there would be a reason to return, because that's what families do. They create gravity. And you would pack your bag and drive or fly back toward the place where the original version of you still lives in the walls. What's fascinating and quietly devastating is that the regression doesn't require an argument. It doesn't need a dramatic confrontation. It can happen simply by sitting at a familiar table, by hearing a particular tone in a voice, by being called by the name they gave you in childhood, in the way only they say it. Your body knows before your mind does. Your shoulders come forward, your sentences shorten, your opinions become quieter, then disappear. You find yourself agreeing to things the person you are everywhere else would never agree to. You leave feeling hollowed out and unsure of why, because nothing happened, nothing you could point to, which almost makes it worse. Have you ever driven home afterward and felt yourself return, mile by mile, to the person you become? At some point, there is usually a moment, not always dramatic, sometimes painfully mundane. Maybe it was a comment made offhandedly at a dinner table, the kind that landed exactly where it was aimed. Maybe it was a silence that said everything no one would speak aloud. Maybe you watched yourself agree to something or shrink from something, and something in you, some older, exhausted part said, I can't keep doing this. This is the breaking point, and it doesn't feel like strength when it comes. It feels like grief. It feels like something tearing slowly that you'd been holding together for years, with the belief that if you just tried harder, accommodated more, needed less, maybe the dynamic would shift. Maybe you would finally feel seen as the person you've actually become. But the breaking moment carries a particular kind of truth. Some environments do not update their image of you. They hold the original file, the child, the one who was difficult, or sensitive, or too much, or never quite enough. And no achievement, no change, no growth you bring to that door changes what they see when you walk through it. That isn't a statement about your worth. It is a statement about the nature of old patterns and the people who have never had reason to question them. Grief enters here. Quiet, complicated, socially unacknowledged grief. Because you are not mourning a death. You are mourning a wish, the one you kept alive for years, that things might one day be different, that you might one day go home and simply feel like enough. What would it mean to stop waiting for that? Rebuilding doesn't look like what people describe in triumph narratives. It isn't a single decision. It isn't a confrontation that fixes everything. It is slower and stranger and more tender than that. It looks like noticing when the smallness arrives, in the chest, in the throat, in the sudden absence of your own opinion, and recognizing it for what it is. Not a truth about you, a learned response, an old survival song playing in a body that doesn't need it anymore, but hasn't been told that yet. It looks like grieving the family you needed and didn't fully have, not in anger, but in something quieter, in honest sadness for the child who deserved more room to exist. It looks like slowly, imperfectly, beginning to bring yourself into spaces where you used to disappear. A sentence you don't soften, a need you don't apologize for, a silence you hold without immediately filling it with accommodation. You will still go home, perhaps. Some people do. And you will still feel some version of that smallness at the door. But here is what changes. You will know what it is. You will be able to say to yourself, quietly, privately, "This is old. I know this feeling. It is not the truth of who I am." And then, mile by mile on the drive back, you will return to yourself. That return, that long, quiet, faithful return to yourself after every visit, is not a failure. It is the most profound kind of resilience. There is a version of you that has survived every single visit, every dinner table that couldn't hold you, every silence that said you were too much, every moment you shrunk yourself into a shape that wasn't yours just to make it through to the other side. That version of you is not broken. They are wise. They adapted to survive. And now, slowly, without urgency, in your own time, they are learning that survival is no longer the only option. You are allowed to take up space, everywhere, even there, especially there. You always were.